Welcome to Family Stories Collection. If you love stories of betrayal, hidden truths, and silent revenge that cuts deeper than any scream, make sure to follow this channel. Every tale is a mirror of life itself, and tonight I will share with you one that will stay with you long after the last word. After 42 years, this house is not just worth $3 million. It is my husband. It is my daughter's childhood. It is every moment of laughter, every tear, every breath of love we poured into its walls. But then, my own son Gavin tried to sell it behind my back. At the dinner table, I looked around, and the air felt heavy with memories. The wooden table Thomas built with his hands, the piano where he would play on Sunday mornings, the lemon tree outside where Elise, my daughter, once read her books under the shade. Thomas has been gone for years, yet his presence lingers in every corner of this house. And now betrayal has found its way into the very place he loved most. Gavin thought I was too old, too fragile, too weak to fight back. He believed that money would erase everything, the memories, the love, the promises etched into these walls. But Gavin did not know. He did not know that Thomas, his own father, had left one last weapon, one final safeguard, hidden inside the old piano bench. A clause written with care, buried deep in his will. Gavin believed he was playing the game. But the truth is, the game was never his to win. And tonight I will tell you how silence, patience, in one old document turned my son's betrayal into his greatest loss. So stay with me. This is not just a story about a house. It is a story about family, about memory, and about the price of greed. Follow Family Stories Collection, and let us begin. And my name is Marion. I am 76 years old, and I have lived in this house for most of my life. To some, it is a house worth $3 million of property in a city where land is scarce and value keeps rising. But to me, it is not just a house. It is the place where my life unfolded. It is where Thomas, my late husband, and I built our family brick by brick, memory by memory. Thomas was a strong man, not in the loud, boastful way, but in the way his presence filled a room without effort. He was a builder, a dreamer, a man who believed that a home was more than walls and windows. It was a shelter for love, for children, for the everyday rituals that create the rhythm of family life. He bought this house when our marriage was still young 42 years ago, and he poured himself into every detail. I remember the day we planted the lemon tree in the backyard. Thomas said, "One day when we are old, we will sit here under its shade and taste the fruit of our years." Elise, our daughter, loved that tree. She would climb its branches when she was small, and later as a teenager, she would sit under it with her books, her hair falling across her face, the sun catching the gold in her eyes. The tree became her companion, her secret diary, a witness to her laughter and her tears. Inside the house, there are pieces of Thomas everywhere. The sturdy wooden table in the dining room carved by his own hands. The piano in the corner, where he would sit on Sunday mornings, his fingers dancing softly across the keys. That piano was more than music. It was the heartbeat of our family. Elise would hum along, her small voice filling the room, while Gavin, our son, would sigh impatiently, wanting to run outside to play or escape to his own world. Yes, Gavin, my son, my complicated child. From the very beginning, he was different from Elise. Where Elise was gentle, Gavin was restless. Where Elise sought comfort in home, Gavin sought escape, adventure, and eventually profit. He would look at the house not as a memory, but as an asset, a thing to measure in dollars and cents, not in love and years. When Thomas passed away, it was as if time split in two. Elise clung to the house even more, saying, "This is Dad. This is all we have left of him." She spent weekends here, even after she moved out, tending the garden, polishing the piano, making sure the lemon tree was watered. Gavin, on the other hand, drifted further away. He lived in the city, chasing deals, chasing wealth. When he visited, his eyes did not linger on the walls or the tree. They scanned the rooms like a realtor's eyes, calculating assessing. I saw the distance growing between my children, and it broke me in ways I cannot describe. Elise wanted to preserve. Gavin wanted to liquidate. Elise wanted memory. Gavin wanted money. And I stood in the middle, the keeper of the house, the bridge between what was and what they thought should be. But let me take you back. Back to the time when this house was still young, when Thomas and I would walk through the empty halls with paint on our clothes and hope in our hearts. I can still smell the fresh wood of the staircase he built, hear the echo of our laughter as we argued about where to place the dining table. Those early years were hard. Money was tight. Thomas worked long hours, and I stayed home with the children. But every corner of this house was filled with love. Elise's drawings still faintly stained the wall of her old bedroom. Gavin's toy cars, once scattered across the living room, left small scratches on the floorboards. This house is more than $3 million. It is 42 years of history. It is Thomas's legacy, Elise's anchor, and though he may not admit it, Gavin's foundation too. He grew up here, even if he chooses to forget it. But now as I sit here, I can feel the storm brewing. Elise is still tied to the house with her heart. Gavin looks at it with cold calculation. And I am caught in the middle. A mother who has already lost her husband, who fears losing the very soul of her family next. Thomas was wise. Before he died, he left something behind. Something I have not yet revealed to my children. A piece of paper hidden inside the bench of the piano. A clause in his will that could change everything. Gavin thinks I am old, fragile, powerless. Elise thinks I will protect the house simply with words and sentiment. But neither of them fully understand the depth of Thomas's foresight or the strength of a mother who refuses to let her family's memories be erased. So this is where we stand. A house worth millions. A daughter bound by love. A son blinded by greed. And a mother who holds a secret that will shatter one of them while saving the other. And as I tell you this story, I ask you, is a house ever just a house? Or does it become the soul of those who lived and loved within its walls? Thomas always had a way of seeing farther than the rest of us. Where I saw the present, he saw the horizon. Where I trusted in family bonds, he quietly acknowledged the shadow that money can cast across even the strongest ties. I remember one evening, many years before he passed. The children were grown, Elise, already working in the city, Gavin chasing his ambitions. We sat in this very dining room, the soft glow of the lamp falling on Thomas's face. His eyes lingered on the family portraits hanging on the wall, the smiles frozen in time, the illusion of permanence. He took my hand and said, "Marion, the day will come when they see this house not as home, but as currency. We must be ready for that day." I laughed, then thinking he was being too cautious, too cynical. Gavin was ambitious, yes, but he was still our son. Elise was gentle, devoted. Surely love would keep them together. But Thomas shook his head, a sadness in his smile. Love is fragile when weighed against millions. I don't doubt their hearts, but I know the world, Marion. And the world changes people. Not long after, Thomas began meeting with an old friend, our trusted attorney, Mr. Park. A quiet man, steady as a stone, who had handled our affairs for decades. I remember the hush of those late-night conversations, the rustle of papers, the low hum of Thomas's voice as he worked through every clause, every condition. He was drafting something beyond the ordinary will. A codicil, he called it an addition, a safeguard buried within the larger document. The language was dense, the kind of legal phrasing meant to slip unnoticed until it mattered most. And what it said was simple but powerful. If either child attempted to force a sale of the house, if the family home was ever treated as mere property, the full ownership would automatically revert to Elise. Elise, the child of memory, the guardian of love. Gavin would never see it coming. He would think himself clever, strong enough to outmaneuver sentiment with contracts and signatures. But Thomas's words would rise up like a wall he could not cross. I can still hear Thomas's voice, the night he placed the sealed envelope in my hands. His breathing was shallow then. The illness had already begun its cruel work. He sat at the piano, his fingers resting on the keys without playing. He looked at me and whispered, "Marion, when family meetings turn into negotiations, when love is spoken of like numbers in a ledger, that is when you use this. Not before, not after. That moment will come, and when it does, you must protect Elise. You must protect what we built." I remember the weight of that envelope, heavier than any stone, heavier than any gold. Inside, it was not just paper. Inside was Thomas's foresight, his trust in me, and his shield for the daughter who had carried his spirit in her heart. I kept it hidden, tucked away in the piano bench, beneath the old sheet music. Elise never knew. Gavin never suspected. Life went on, and the codicil slept waiting like a blade, kept sharp in silence. Years passed. I grew older. Elise came home often, watering the lemon tree, dusting the shelves, sitting by the piano, as if she could still hear her father's music. Gavin came less and less. And when he did, his words were clipped efficient, as though the house was already a line item in his portfolio. And all the while, I carried Thomas's secret like a quiet ember in my chest. Sometimes late at night, I would take out the envelope and hold it under the lamplight, tracing his handwriting on the cover. For Marion, for when the time comes. The time had not come yet, but I knew it would. Thomas had been right about so many things in life. I had no doubt he would be right about this too. And so I waited. I kept my silence. Elise remained in her innocence, believing love alone would protect the house. Gavin remained in his hunger, circling closer, not yet striking. And I, the mother, the widow, the keeper of both memory and weapon, sat between them. One day soon, the dining room would no longer echo with laughter. It would echo with arguments. Elise's voice trembling with emotion. Gavin's sharp with calculation. And mine, steady calm, holding the truth Thomas had left behind. Yes, Thomas prepared for the day his son might betray the home he built. And he armed me with the power to stop it. It is strange, isn't it? How love sometimes looks like war. How a husband, even in his last days, can see the storm that a wife still refuses to imagine. But Thomas saw it. He wrote it down. He placed it in my hands. And when the day comes, I will be ready. Betrayal never comes with thunder. It comes quietly, disguised as care, hidden behind the small gestures of family. It began with a stack of papers Gavin brought one Sunday afternoon. He placed them on the dining room table with a practiced calm, his smile tight but polished. "Mom," he said, "these are just some health forms. Standard things the insurance company requires now that you're over 75. Nothing urgent, nothing complicated, just routine." The words sounded harmless, the tone even kinder than usual, but something in his eyes betrayed the truth. A flicker too sharp, too calculating. He slid the pages toward me, pointing with a pen. "This section just updates your medical contacts. Here your signature confirms I can handle procedures if you're ever unwell. It's really about protecting you, Mom. You don't want Elise or me scrambling during an emergency." I looked down at the fine print. Legal phrases, financial terms, hiding in the folds of medical jargon. My hand hovered over the paper. Thomas's voice whispered in my mind, when meetings sound like negotiations, that's the moment to use it. But it wasn't time yet, not quite. So I smiled. I picked up the pen, and I signed. Gavin's relief was almost too visible. He tucked the papers away with a crisp efficiency, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "You won't regret this, Mom." Days later, I learned what those papers really were. A disguised authorization, granting Gavin the power to manage the house, to act as though the deed were his alone. The house where Thomas and I had built 42 years of life. The house Elise called the heart of our family. He wasted no time. Through whispered phone calls and hurried meetings, Gavin contacted a real estate developer known for swallowing old homes whole and replacing them with glass towers. $3 million, that was the number he repeated, as though the figure itself erased memory, erased loyalty, erased blood. I overheard one of his calls in the hallway. His voice was low, eager, almost trembling with hunger. Yes, the house is prime location. No structural issues. Market's hot. We'll close quickly, my mother won't resist. She trusts me completely. Trust. He said it like a weapon. But Elise? Oh, Elise. She saw through him instantly. The night Gavin announced his plan, Elise's face turned pale, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the dining table. Sell the house? She whispered, her voice breaking. Gavin, this isn't just a property. This is Dad. This is us. Gavin scoffed. Elise, don't be dramatic. It's a house. Bricks woodland. We're talking about $3 million. Think about what that could do for us. Us. Elise shot back, tears welling in her eyes. Or you, because I don't see family in this deal. I see your ambition swallowing everything Dad loved. The silence that followed cut deeper than any argument. Elise looked at me, pleading. Her eyes begged for my voice, my defense, my refusal, but I stayed quiet. Mom, she asked, desperate, say something. Tell him this house isn't for sale. Tell him Dad's memory matters more than his money. And I forced myself to nod slowly, as if Gavin's logic made sense. I whispered, maybe he's right, Elise. Maybe it's time to think about the future. I saw her heart crack in that moment. She turned away, her shoulders shaking, unable to believe I had surrendered so easily. Gavin, on the other hand, smiled like a victor. To him, my silence was consent. My weakness was his triumph. That night, alone in my room, I wept quietly. Not for the house, though. Every brick, every beam of it lived inside my heart. But for Elise, who thought her mother had abandoned her. I longed to tell her the truth, to show her the envelope Thomas had left the codicil that would soon turn Gavin's victory into ash. But I couldn't. Not yet. To reveal it too early would ruin everything. So I carried the mask of surrender. I let Gavin believe he had won. The following weeks were filled with preparations. Gavin brought appraisers, surveyors, men with polished shoes and clipboards, who walked through the halls as though they already owned them. I watched as they measured walls, tapped on beams, scribbled notes, strangers dissecting the veins of my home. Every visit was a knife. Elise avoided those days, her heart too fragile to watch strangers carve up her childhood. She would retreat to the piano room instead, pressing keys that no longer carried her father's hands, her music mingling with her tears. It's all slipping away, she told me one evening, her voice hoarse. Dad's laughter in the garden, the lemon tree, the summer nights on the porch. He built this place for us, and now Gavin wants to trade it for numbers in a bank account. I stroked her hair, whispering, trust me, Elise. Trust me a little longer. She didn't understand. She thought I was weak, defeated. But soon she would know. Gavin grew bolder with each step. Contracts were drafted. Dates were set. He invited me to sit with him as he reviewed the glossy brochures of the future tower that would stand where our house did. Mom, imagine it, he said, his eyes gleaming. A modern skyscraper, luxury condos, a new legacy for our family. Dad would be proud. Proud. Proud that his life's work was erased for glass and steel. Proud that his daughter's tears were ignored. Gavin's blindness was staggering. But I only nodded, murmuring, yes, perhaps, because the trap was almost ready to close. The day of signing approached. Gavin polished his shoes, rehearsed his charm, convinced himself he was the master of this game. He didn't notice the quiet strength in my silence, the steel hidden beneath my sighs. Elise begged me one last time. Mom, please don't do this. Don't let him sell Dad's house. I touched her hand, my voice soft. Sometimes, Elise, love must look like surrender. But wait for the signing. That's when truth will speak. She looked at me, confused, hurt, but somewhere in her eyes, a flicker of hope remained. And so I waited. I endured Gavin's arrogance, Elise's disappointment, the stranger's footsteps echoing in our halls. I endured it all for one moment. The moment when paper would meet pen, when signatures would decide the fate of this house. And in that moment, I would bring out Thomas's secret, The codicil, the weapon hidden in plain sight. Yes, Gavin believed he had already won, but he had no idea that his father's hand would rise from the past to strike him down. And I was ready. They say betrayal breaks quietly, but truth crashes like thunder. The morning of the signing, the house felt heavier than ever. Every corner of it seemed to hold its breath, the lemon tree outside the window, the creak of the piano bench, the faint scratches on the dining table from decades of family dinners. All of it waited. Gavin arrived first. His suit was new dark blue with a red tie. He smelled of cologne and victory. Elise followed minutes later wearing a simple black dress, her eyes red from sleepless nights. She avoided Gavin's gaze, staying close to me like a shadow. By noon, the buyer arrived, a man named Richard Chen, polished, efficient with a notary, and Gavin's real estate attorney in tow. They brought folders, pens, and the cold smell of business into a home that had never known such air. We sat at the long wooden table, the same table Thomas had polished every Christmas Eve. Elise's hands trembled under the surface, clutching her knees. Gavin smiled too broadly, flipping through documents as though he had already claimed victory. "Mom," Gavin said smoothly, sliding the first set of papers toward me, "these are just preliminary acknowledgments. Nothing serious. Just confirming ownership." I nodded, pretending to read my hands calm, though my heart pounded. Elise's eyes darted to me, begging, "Please stop this." I gave her no answer. Not yet. Page after page, I signed where required. The buyer nodded, the notary stamped. It was a rhythm, a dance of ink and paper, one step closer to losing everything Thomas and I had built. Finally, the attorney announced, "We've reached the grant deed. Once executed, ownership will transfer. Mr. Chen will wire the funds within 48 hours." Silence fell like a blade. Gavin leaned forward, pen in hand, his breath shallow with anticipation. Elise turned pale, tears burning her eyes, and I reached into my handbag. The leather creaked as I pulled out a thick envelope yellowed slightly with age. Gavin frowned, annoyed at the interruption. Elise blinked, confused. I placed it on the table with deliberate care. The sound echoed louder than any stamp. "What is this?" Gavin asked, irritation breaking through his polished mask. I didn't answer. Instead, I looked to the corner of the room where an older man in a gray suit stepped forward. His presence had been invisible until that moment, quiet, observant, waiting. "Good afternoon," he said calmly. "I'm attorney Samuel Park. I represented your late father Thomas for over 30 years. Gavin's face drained of color. "What?" The buyer's lawyer frowned. "Mr. Park, this is irregular. We're in the middle of a legal transfer." "Correction." Park interrupted, his voice firm but measured. "You were in the middle of an attempted transfer, but before any signatures are executed, you need to see this." He opened the envelope and laid out a document on the table. The seal shimmered faintly in the afternoon light. Elise gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. It was Thomas's codicil. Park continued. "This is a legally binding amendment to Mr. Thomas Whitaker's last will and testament executed in 2019. It stipulates that in the event any child attempts to sell the family residence without the full consent of both Marion Whitaker and Elise Whitaker, the property shall immediately and irrevocably transfer solely to Elise Whitaker." The words hit like cannon fire. The buyer froze his pen halfway to paper. The notary's stiffened eyes wide. Elise began to tremble, tears spilling silently down her cheeks. "This is absurd!" Gavin shouted, slamming his fist against the table. "That can't be valid! He would never—" "He did," Park said evenly, producing notarized signatures. "Witnessed, sealed, and recorded. Mr. Whitaker foresaw the possibility of conflict and chose to protect the home accordingly." Gavin's composure shattered. His voice cracked, rising into desperation. "No, he trusted me. I'm the eldest. I was supposed to—" "You were supposed to protect this family," I whispered, my voice, steady but heavy with sorrow. "Not sell it for profit." Gavin turned to me, eyes blazing. "You knew. All along you knew." I nodded, slowly, calmly. Yes, and I let you walk yourself here, Gavin. I let you believe I was powerless. Because sometimes, silence is the sharpest weapon. The buyer stood abruptly, gathering his papers. This transaction is terminated. I will not involve myself in contested property. Good day. With that, Richard Chen and his lawyer walked out their polished shoes, striking the wood like a final gavel. The room collapsed into silence. Only Elise's muffled sobs filled the air. Gavin sank back into his chair, pale, broken. His hands clawed at the edge of the table, his lips trembling. You betrayed me. Your own son. I looked at him with eyes colder than the marble floor beneath us. No, Gavin. You betrayed yourself. You betrayed your father, your sister. In this house. Elise reached for my hand, tears still streaming. Her voice cracked with disbelief. Mom, you saved it. You saved Dad's house. I turned to her, squeezing her hand gently. Not me, Elise. Your father. He chose you to guard this place, to keep the memories alive. Today was never my revenge. It was his gift to you. The piano in the next room seemed to hum with memory, as though Thomas himself had touched its keys once more. Elise wept openly, her head bowed onto the table. Gavin sat motionless, staring into nothing, the weight of defeat crushing him. And I, Marion Whitaker, finally exhaled the breath I had been holding for months. The house would remain. The memories would survive. And the silence I carried had delivered the loudest judgment of all. They say revenge is loud, but justice is patient. And in the weeks after the signing collapsed, patience became the silent force that stripped Gavin of everything he thought he controlled. The first blow came swift. Escrow was canceled. The $3 million deal he bragged about to colleagues evaporated overnight. The buyer's lawyer filed a notice of withdrawal, citing irrevocable legal encumbrances. In simple words, the house was untouchable. Gavin's promised commission, the consulting fee he had already whispered about to friends at the country club, dissolved into smoke. The second blow was slower, more humiliating. His LLC, a shell company he had set up with two partners designed to funnel profits from the sale, suddenly became worthless. Without the house as collateral, their investors pulled out. Within days, the partners stopped returning his calls. One even demanded repayment for expenses Gavin had promised to cover. In the world of business, loyalty lasts only as long as profit. By the third week, Gavin's world had shrunk into bitterness. He posted cryptic messages online, little fragments of self-pity disguised as wisdom. Sometimes the worst betrayals come from those you call family. His followers, unaware of the truth, sent sympathetic comments. Gavin fed on them like crumbs of validation, but the walls of his reality were closing in. Meanwhile, Elise moved in silence. She never gloated, never threw his failure in his face. Instead, she tended to the house as if nothing had changed. I would wake in the morning to see her out in the yard, watering the lemon tree her father planted 40 years ago. The same tree Gavin once called a useless relic that blocks the sunlight. Elise would hum softly, pruning branches, her hands steady, her eyes calm. The contrast was painful, almost cruel in its clarity. Elise nurtured life. Gavin broadcasted poison. One afternoon, as Elise polished the piano bench, Thomas's bench, Gavin stormed into the house. His tie was loosened, his face pale with stress. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" He spat, standing in the doorway like an exile, demanding re-entry. Elise didn't look up. She kept polishing her voice low. "I didn't do anything to you, Gavin. You did it to yourself." His laugh was sharp, hollow. "That's exactly what Mom says. Both of you against me, toxic family. You'd rather cling to wood and bricks than support your own blood." She finally looked at him, then her eyes clear as water. "This house isn't just wood and bricks. It's Dad, it's Mom, it's me, and it should have been you too. But you walked away a long time ago." He clenched his fists, but said nothing more. He left the way he came, loudly, without grace. Hours later, I saw his words online again. Some families destroy themselves from the inside. Beware of wolves in your own home. And yet the house remained quiet. Elise's footsteps on the wooden floor. The sound of the kettle in the morning. The faint echo of Thomas's memory in the piano keys. Every day, I watched Gavin unravel, while Elise grew steadier, stronger. She never responded to his accusations, never engaged with his bitterness. She let silence once more do the work. The house had chosen its guardian. And Gavin, my son, my blood, had chosen to exile himself, not by force, but by greed. And that, perhaps, was the truest revenge of all. Not in court battles or public shaming, but in the simple, devastating contrast between two children. One who watered the lemon tree, and one who poisoned his own name. They say the darkest night comes just before dawn. For me, that night arrived when Gavin returned, not as a son, but as a desperate man, cornered by his own greed. It began with a phone call at 2:13 a.m. The sound startled me awake. Elise, who had stayed over that week, rushed into my room, worry etched on her face. I picked up the phone, my voice trembling. "Mom, it's me," Gavin whispered. His tone was stripped of arrogance, replaced by a hollow fear I had never heard before. "I need help. Please. They're going to kill me." At first, I thought it was a nightmare. But then he said the words that turned my blood cold. "I borrowed money from people, Mom. Bad people. I used the house as collateral. I told them I'd have it sold by now. But since the deal collapsed, they want their money back. 300,000, cash, by Friday." My breath caught in my throat. He had dragged the house, Thomas's house, my life's sanctuary, into the claws of loan sharks. "How could you do that?" I asked, my voice breaking. "After everything. After the codicil. After the humiliation at that table. How could you gamble again with what isn't yours?" "Because I had no choice." He snapped, then broke down into sobs. "They'll break my legs, Mom. They said they'll come after you and Elise too. Please, you have to give me the money just this once. I swear I'll pay it back." Elise took the phone from my hand, her voice shaking with fury. "You don't get it, Gavin. The house isn't your ATM. Dad left it for memory, for family, not for you to pawn to thugs. Stop dragging Mom into your mess." There was silence. Then his voice, softer, desperate. "Elise, you don't understand. You've always been Mom's favorite. You got the house. What did I get? Nothing but expectations. I just wanted my share." The words hit me like daggers. Expectations. Share. As if love could be measured in money. When Elise hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed, trembling. My son, my flesh and blood, had become a beggar for debt, a prisoner of his own greed. I remembered the boy he once was chasing, fireflies in the yard, building forts with Elise under the lemon tree, laughing at Thomas's off-key, singing at the piano. Where had that child gone? The next morning, Gavin showed up at the door. His face was pale, unshaven eyes, bloodshot with panic. He dropped to his knees in the foyer. "Mom, please. I need you. They gave me 2 days. 2 days or I'm dead. Don't let your son die because of a few $100,000. I wanted to reach for him. I wanted to gather him in my arms, call him my boy, like I once did. But Elise stood behind me, her hand on my shoulder. Her voice was steady. "Mom, don't. If you give in now, it will never end. The house will never be safe. He'll keep coming back, keep dragging us down." Gavin looked up, tears streaking his face. "So you'll let them kill me, your own son. You'll protect a house over my life." My knees buckled. The weight of his words pressed down on me like a mountain. Elise caught me whispering, "It's not the house, Mom. It's Dad. It's everything he built. It's the memories we're protecting. You taught me love isn't enabling self-destruction." I turned to Gavin, my heart shattering. "The house is not a bank. It is not your bargaining chip. You will not destroy what your father built with his bare hands. If you truly loved this family, You would never have done this." For the first time, Gavin had no words. He just stared at me hollow, as if seeing a stranger where his mother once stood. Then he stumbled to his feet, muttering, "You'll regret this when I'm gone." He left. The door slammed. The silence afterward was unbearable, heavier than death itself. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in Thomas's old chair by the piano, tears soaking the codicil that had saved us once before. My mind screamed with guilt. Had I failed as a mother? Had I raised a son so consumed by greed that he would rather destroy than preserve? Elise knelt beside me, taking my hands into hers. Her eyes were red but resolute. "Mom, you didn't fail. You gave him love, chances more than he ever deserved. He chose this path. But I need you to stay strong for me, for us, for Dad. We can't lose you, too." Her words anchored me. In that moment, I realized the cruelest truth. Sometimes protecting one child means letting go of another. I whispered into the dark to Thomas, to God, to myself. I may have raised a son blinded by money, but I must protect the daughter who still believes in memory, in us. Outside, the lemon tree swayed under the weight of summer wind, and in its rustling leaves, I swore. I heard Thomas's voice, steady, unyielding. "Protect Elise, protect the house, even if it breaks your heart." That was the night I truly understood revenge was never about destroying Gavin. It was about saving what was left of us, even if it meant sacrificing the bond I once held dearest. They say revenge burns like fire, but sometimes it is quieter than a whisper, a signature on paper, a bowl of soup, a house that refuses to leave its roots. 3 days after Gavin came begging in despair, Attorney Park arrived at the old house with a thick folder neatly tucked under his arm. I remember that afternoon vividly, July sunlight streaming through the windows, landing on the same wooden table where generations of our family had once gathered. Elise sat beside me, her eyes still swollen from sleepless nights. Gavin walked in looking disheveled, his shirt wrinkled, his face pale and weary. Yet in his eyes, there was still a flicker of hope, the hope that somehow he could twist fate back in his favor. "Mrs. Marion, Miss Elise," Attorney Park began, his voice calm but resolute. "According to the codicil your husband Thomas left behind, this house shall permanently belong to Elise if there is ever coercion, forgery, or an attempt to sell it unlawfully. And Marion, you retain the right to live here for the rest of your life." He paused, then opened the folder. The paper lay flat on the table, bearing Thomas's signature, strong, deliberate, as if he had signed it just yesterday. Gavin froze. His face turned ashen, like he had just seen the ghost of his father standing in the room. This isn't possible," he stammered, his voice cracking. "Dad would never do this. He would never favor one child over the other." Attorney Park adjusted his glasses and fixed his gaze on Gavin. "Your father knew his children well. He wasn't favoring Elise. He was protecting this house, this family's soul from greed. The codicil has been filed with the court, and it is legally binding. There is no appeal, no loophole, no reversal." At that moment, Gavin broke. Every weapon, every forged document, every scheme he had carefully crafted over months crumbled into dust. He pressed his hands against the table, his head bowed, his shoulders trembling. Whether from shame or fury, I couldn't tell. I said nothing. Elise said nothing. The only sound was the clock ticking on the wall, each second engraving Gavin's defeat deeper into the silence. A few days later, we sat down for what could only be called our last family meal. I had cooked a pot of chicken soup, Thomas's favorite recipe, the one he used to prepare whenever someone in the family was sick. Elise set the table with 3 bowls. Gavin arrived late, his face worn and his hair unkempt, looking like a man crushed beneath the weight of failure. No one spoke of the house. No one spoke of debts, of loan sharks, or of the codicil. The silence was so heavy that the clink of a spoon against porcelain echoed like thunder. Then Elise, without a word, lifted the ladle and served Gavin a bowl of soup. She slid it across the table, setting it gently before him. The gesture was tender, but merciless. It was a verdict delivered not in anger, but in silence. I saw Gavin's hands tremble. His eyes glistened, not with tears of regret, but with the realization that the battle was over. His sister, the one he had dismissed as sentimental and weak, was now the guardian of everything he had tried to steal. And I, his mother, had chosen memory over ambition. That night, sitting with Elise on the porch, I whispered, "Elise, do you know what revenge really is? Sometimes it isn't about destroying. It's about preserving. Preserving what was never meant to be taken. Preserving the house your father built with sweat and love. Preserving our memories so greed cannot devour them." Elise leaned her head against my shoulder, her voice trembling. "I understand, Mother, and I promise I'll protect this place, for as long as the lemon tree still has green leaves." I looked out into the garden. The old lemon tree stood tall, its roots deep in the soil, its branches swaying in the breeze. It was as if Thomas himself whispered through the leaves, "You did the right thing. You kept our soul alive." And in that moment, I knew the revenge was complete. No shouting, no blood, no violence. Just a codicil, a bowl of soup in silence. Enough to shatter ambition, enough to end betrayal. Revenge is not always about destruction. Sometimes it is about guarding memory and letting truth itself deliver the sentence. They say revenge leaves scars. But when I sit here tonight, in the quiet of this house, I don't feel like I won a war. I feel like I held on long enough for time to show its truth. The living room glows with the soft yellow of the old lamp. The piano, though untouched for years, still carries the smell of polish and dust. Elise hums in the kitchen, her voice faint like her mother's once was. Gavin is gone now, not by death, but by distance. He slipped out of our lives as quietly as he once stormed into them, chasing money, chasing schemes, chasing illusions that never loved him back. Perhaps that is punishment enough. I did not win because I shouted louder. I did not win because I struck harder. I won because I knew how to wait. Because I trusted that patience could carve deeper than fury ever could. Thomas used to tell me, Marion walls crumble under storms, but they also crumble under time. Choose which you want to be. I chose time. $3 million. That's what the world would have seen in this house. Just a price tag, a transaction, a deal waiting to be signed. But sitting here now listening to the creak of the wooden stairs, touching the dent in the dining table where Gavin once carved his initials as a boy, I know the truth. This house isn't worth $3 million. It's worth my life. It is priceless because inside it, memories breathe. Inside it, Thomas still laughs. Inside it, Elise still finds her childhood waiting. Elise has become the keeper of these walls. When I watch her water the lemon tree, her fingers brushing its leaves with tenderness, I see Thomas's bloodline stretching on, not in money, not in contracts, but in care. She is the daughter who understands that legacy is not something you sell, but something you guard. The codicil made her the legal heir, but her heart made her the rightful one. As for Gavin, sometimes I wonder if I failed him as a mother. Did I give too much freedom, too little guidance? Or was greed always waiting in his veins, a fire that no mother's hand could cool? He doesn't call. He doesn't write. Perhaps he is ashamed. Perhaps he still blames me. But when I think of him, I don't feel anger anymore. Only distance, like a door. I closed gently and locked forever. Some children you raise to stay. Some children you raise to let go. Gavin belongs to the latter. In me, I am old. My hands tremble when I pour tea. My knees ache when I climb the stairs. But I am still here in the house Thomas built, in the house Elise will guard after me. People ask if I regret not selling, not taking the money and moving into comfort. But how do I explain? You cannot buy a home like this. You cannot price the smell of lemon blossoms in the spring or the echo of your husband's footsteps still lingering on the porch. You cannot buy peace, not the kind that comes when you know you honored love above all else. So I sit here tonight, whispering not to the walls, but to the ghosts that linger inside them. Thomas, I kept my promise. Elise is safe. The house is safe. The memories are safe. And in the silence, I swear, I hear him answer through the wind rattling the shutters. Well done, Marion. Well done. Revenge, I've learned, is not always about making someone suffer. Sometimes it is about refusing to let them take what matters most. Gavin wanted money. I gave Elise memory. That is the true inheritance. That is the true victory. I did not win because I punished. I won because I endured. And that endurance, quiet, patient, unyielding, became the sharpest weapon of all. My son thought he had already won the moment he held the contract in his hands. He thought power was measured in signatures and bank transfers. But what he never understood is that the real verdict was never in his control. The true sentence was carried not by my voice, but by my silence, and by his father's signature written years before he even thought of betrayal. The room falls quiet in my memory. I can still see Gavin's face as the codicil slid across the polished oak table. His lips trembled. His eyes searched for a loophole, a way out, but there was none. It was not me who spoke that day. It was Thomas. Even from the grave, he made sure our daughter Elise would inherit more than a house. She inherited dignity. She inherited love, safeguarded by foresight. Some people believe money defines legacy. But tonight, as I sit in the stillness of these walls, I know legacy is carved in memory, in sacrifice, in the choices we defend when no one else dares. Gavin lost not because I shouted, not because I fought. He lost because he underestimated silence, the kind of silence that holds the weight of generations. And now I ask you, if it were you standing at this crossroads, what would you choose? Would you chase the money, the fleeting comfort of $3 million? Or would you hold on to memory, to the irreplaceable warmth of a home built with love, even if the world told you it was foolish? Revenge in my story was not loud. It was calm. It was steady. It was the quiet refusal to surrender what mattered most. That is why my son walked away empty, while my daughter stood stronger than ever. So tell me, dear listener, if it were your family, would you choose money or memory? And before you go, don't forget Follow Family Stories collection to hear more dramatic, heart-stirring family revenge stories like this one. Stories where betrayal meets justice, where silence speaks louder than rage, and where love in the end always has the last word.